So we're going to do a couple different types of fishnets. First thing I'm going to do is duplicate this base mesh off, select it, turn off your other one so you don't get confused as to which one you're working on. And let's go ahead and turn on polyframe here, and I hold down Control, and I change this to mask lasso, and I'm just going to mask out a little area where I want fishnets. For example, we'll start here, and then I can hit Control W to give me a polygroup on this side, hit Control Shift to isolate that polygroup by tapping it, and make sure you don't have any subdivision history, so I'm going to delete higher, and then you're going to want to go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. Now we need to polish out these borders here, so really quickly I'm going to go down to Masking, turn off Groups and Crease, and just do Mask by Feature with Border selected. Control Tap in your document to invert that selection, and then go over here to Deformation, Polish by Features Open Circle, and you can just tap that a couple times and that'll polish those borders. That'll give you a little bit of a cleaner Z-remesh when it analyzes this mesh. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's go ahead and Z-remesh this thing. So I'm going to go to Geometry, Z-remesher. I'm going to change, it doesn't matter, but I'm going to turn this target polygon count down to like 2 or something. The adaptive size I'm going to turn down to 0 so that I get nice even quads. And I'm going to turn off Use Polypay here. And then I'm going to hit Z-remesh. There we go. And if that's too high, what we're going to do is actually replace every single one of these faces with a fish net, a little piece of the net there. So if I was to do that right now, it'd be a pretty dense fish net. So what I'm going to do is go hit half over here and just hit Z-remesh again, and again, and again, until it gets down to the density that you want. Let's do it one more time. Okay, that'll work. So let's go ahead and turn on the eyeball on our other guy here. And before I start doing my micro mesh, what I'm going to do is go ahead and inflate this a little bit. So I'm going to go down here to Deformations, and I'm just going to do an inflate. So you can just tap this and hit 1 and enter until it gets inflated enough. You can also go in here and go into your move brush and kind of pull these things around. Now the reason I'm doing this now is because once we replace this mesh with a more complex mesh, it might get a little bit more difficult to kind of move around. So once this is what we like, let's go ahead and start the process of making our fishnet. So I'm going to grab the simple brush here, I'm going to go to Plane 3D, drag that out, hit go into edit mode, and then we're going to hit make polymesh 3D so we can start modifying this geometry. Now with geometry opening, hit reconstruct, and I'll hit reconstruct one more time. You know what? Just reconstruct once and then hit delete higher. And what we're going to do is hold down Control Shift to grab our select rect. Go ahead and start dragging out a square, hold down spacebar to kind of move that into place, and then hold down Alt to get rid of these. And then go ahead and do a delete hidden. I'm sorry, I keep going to my little custom menu here. Modify topology, delete hidden. And then now with this, what I'm going to do is go over here to deformation, and I'm going to go rotate in the Z 45 degrees. I'm going to go into my Z modeler brush, so BZ, and then M is Z modeler. And then I'm going to hover over a point, hit spacebar, go to delete, and then we're just going to delete these points, like so. Now I'm going to try something first. What I'm going to do is I basically have just made this mesh, and when I apply it to my mesh, what's going to happen is all of this stuff's going to be, it's not going to conform to my mesh when I smooth it, so I'm actually going to simplify this geometry a little bit. One of the easier ways, I guess we can just go into Z modeler here and hover over an edge and do insert single edge loop, and I'm going to hit X to go across the X symmetry, and just for the heck of it, let's go transform and go X and Y, and that way we can hold down Alt and just every other one. I'm just going to get rid of one of these things, and it'll go ahead and do all of those lines all the way around. So I just basically simplified this geometry. And looks like I missed a point over here, so I'm going to do a delete point. There we go. So now I have my points deleted, and I've simplified this geometry. So I'm going to use this as my micro mesh replacement. So let's go ahead and go back to our guy over here. And we know it's our guy because it's got that little 2, and that means we have a guy, 2 subtools, the guy, and the original micro mesh we want to replace. So now with that mesh selected, I'm going to go down here to, modify topology, and there's a micro mesh button. Just go ahead and select that and grab your PM 3D plane that you just made. It's going to tell you it's only visible when you hit BPR if you turn on Draw Micro Mesh in the render palette. Hit OK, go up here to your render palette, go to Render Properties, turn on Draw Micro Mesh. Now when you zoom in, you'll see a little white outline of what your micro mesh is going to look like. If you hit BPR, I'm going to change this S-Pix down to 1 just so it renders a little bit faster, and hit BPR, and that's a preview of our render. Now you're going to see, if I go into solo mode and hit BPR, these things are overlapping. So what I need to do is go back to our Polymesh 3D, hit F to frame that object, snap it to the front view here, and go down here to Deformation and just hit Unify. What that's going to do, for example, if I go to Append a Cube, go out of solo mode here and turn on transparent, you're going to see it fits this shape right inside of a ZBrush default primitive unit. And that makes Micromesh work a little bit better. So I'm going to hit delete, go back up here to my arm here, and go back down here to Micromesh and turn it off, turn it back on, and then reselect the Polymesh Plane 3D. And now you're going to see they all match up. So when I hit BPR render, they look beautiful and they all match up. Now one thing we need to do is go ahead and convert this render, because right now it only shows up when it renders. We want to turn that into geometry. Go here to the top of the geometry menu and hit convert BPR to geo. So if I click that, now we have actual usable geometry. So now what we need to do is get thickness on this. But before we do that, if you go down here and you hold down shift, you'll actually see that sometimes it doesn't actually weld these points together. It looks like it's not doing much right now. If I unmask here, on the off chance they start splitting on you right there, go ahead and go down here to modify topology and hit weld points. That'll weld any overlapping points in here. And now you can safely, a couple different ways. We'll do it with ZBrush right now. So we have QMesh of poly. If you hover over a face and hold down spacebar, you can change that to, you can keep it on QMesh if you want. You can also do an extrude and make sure you have polygroup all or all polygons as your target. And just go ahead and click and pull, and that'll give you some thickness. It'll actually also crease your polygroups, and you can also crease your polygroups over under here or under the crease menu as well. So now when I hit Control D, it'll go ahead and smooth these polygons out. And actually it looked like when I was smoothing it, it actually did move these points apart. But where it welded it, it did a really good job. If you don't want to crease your polygroups, just go over here to your crease menu and do uncrease all. And then when you hit Control D, it'll turn into more of a tube shape. Now that we've got that, if it's a little bit too thin, you can always go to your inflate menu, and that'll inflate it along the normals of the objects. We'll go ahead and inflate here and hit 1, or you can always do a point number in here, so 0.25. That'll inflate it just a little bit. And there's some fishnets. If I want this on the other arm, I need to go up here to geometry, delete lower, go ahead, sorry I keep going to my menu here, I'm going to mirror it across the X. And then I'm going to go to deformation, geometry, modify topology, and then mirror and weld across the X. So now you can see why I use my custom menu, because that's a lot of stuff to go and find. So now that I've got that on both sides, I can turn on X, and then I can go in here and just refine this as a mesh if I'd like to. So let's go ahead and do that again, and we're going to do a couple different techniques here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab one of his legs. I'm just a little bit faster to do just one side and mirror it over. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do one leg, and we'll go ahead and do, let's just do this, about mid-thigh stockings. And then I'm going to hit Control W. Control W is going to give you that polygroup. Control Shift. We need to go ahead and delete higher if we have any subdivision history. Go ahead and delete hidden. And then we'll just go ahead and polish that polygroup border. You can go ahead and make a macro if you want. So I can go up here to my macros, and I have a polish by polygroup border that just does it in one button click. And then I can go over here to my ZRemesher here and turn off use poly paint. We're going to take, target polygon count like it 1 or 2, adaptive size at 0, and then hit ZRemesh. And just like last time, depending on how fine you want these fishnets, you can keep it here, or you can turn on half and just keep ZRemeshing it down. Let's say this is what we want, and again we turn the adaptive size down to 0 to get nice even quads. And now that we've done that, we're going to go to Micromesh here, grab our Micromesh, do a quick BPR preview render. Looks good. I'm going to bring everything back so I can go ahead and do a quick inflate while it's simple geometry. Go down here to the inflate menu here, and you can either drag that slider, or you can just type in 1 a couple times just to kind of inflate it out. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to convert that to geo. So go back to the top of the geometry menu, convert BPR to geo, and now we can go ahead and do, we need to do skin thickness, but first we need a weld. So geometry, I'm just going to go to my custom menu here. Weld, points, it's under modified topology, and then we're going to go and give this thing thickness. Now if you don't want to use ZModeler, you can go up here to the extract menu. You can turn off T border and keep double on, turn smoothness all the way down. Change the thick, you can do an extract preview, that's pretty thick by default, so I'm going to go like 0.0005. Hit extract, that gives you a little preview render, that looks pretty good. I'm going to hit accept because again that's just a preview, and and that's going to throw my actual extracted mesh underneath it. If I turn off my original geometry, you're going to see I have a mesh with extracted detail in here. It did crease the polygroups. If you don't want that, go to your crease menu and turn off uncrease, or just go to your custom menu here and hit uncrease all. And now, when I hit Control D, that'll smooth it out. Everything's nice and welded. And if I want to inflate this stuff, I can go here to inflate. Hit 1, or that's a little bit thick. Maybe like 0.1 or 0.2. Depending. If you need to do a little bit more cleanup, you can certainly do that. Just go in here with your move brush. And now, again, if we want to get this on the other side of his body, we need to delete any subdivision history on here. I'm just going to use my custom menu. I'm going to do a quick mirror and weld, go across the x-axis, and there I go. Of course, mirror is under deformation, mirror and weld's under modify topology, just like the arm here. So let's go ahead and bring back all this cool stuff. And now we have our guy with fishnets on his body, and there are separate pieces of geo, so when we render it, or it's a little bit more malleable than having to go in there with a texture. One more thing I want to mention before we go is every time we hit delete lower so we can mirror the stuff, you can always get that back. All you have to do is hit reconstruct, and that'll give you your subdivision levels back. So I'm going to go ahead and select the leg and the arm, hit reconstruct, and now I have that full reconstruction on that geometry, so I can always go back down to subdivision level 1 if I want, and then go back up to subdivision level 2.